Hello and good evening.
You doing?
You can hear us, you see us, we're all good.
Very well. Yeah, look at married life there. It looks amazing.
Oh, it's great.
Ah, yes, blissful.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. We're just taking just a minute or two there. We're a couple of minutes early.
No worries.
Guys, if you're just joining in, thanks so much for getting involved and signing up for tonight's session. I'm just going to do my little charity plug here for a second. If anybody's watching there, we're supporting the Children's Ambulance Service, Bumbulance. You can make a voluntary donation of €4, €4, by texting BUZZ to 50300. If you're not familiar with Bumbulance, they do some incredible work with oftentimes terminally ill children. And if you're not aware of them, check out bumbulance.com. It's really quite something, and they deserve all the support they can get. How are you? You's busy?
Yeah, we are actually. You would think, well, there's all sorts of people, during lockdown, there was lots of people I heard who were learning to play banjo and learning a second language and reading all those books that they never read. But we've sort of had the opposite experience in that we have our 6-year-old in the house with us permanently, and still, which is great, but also still lots of work to do. So yeah.
So we've been just doing a lot of development and some writing and things like that, and I'm hoping that we'll get to shoot a film again before too long.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have an 11-year-old, so I know that particular.
How's it been going? How's the homeschooling, etc. been going?
There's a lot of door slamming, and
and that's just you.
That's just me to get away. But yeah, pretty good generally speaking. So just as in terms of a segue, we might chat a little bit, just a little bit before Paul comes back and the rest of the audience gravitates over. About working with Colin over the years, Colin McKeown, because Colin does a lot of work with us with development of up and coming talent and stuff with us. So
yes. I mean, we were listening to Colin just there at the end talking, and as he said, we have known one another in various sort of capacities around film for so many years, and he started as a really kind and supportive mentor in a lot of ways. The first job I ever did that was related to film was working with Colin, reading scripts and working as a script editor on different projects, and he was really kind enough to give me a lot of opportunities that got me involved in that sort of world. I'd almost forgotten about the film that we acted in that he was talking about.
Yeah, I actually had to. Though it is still on our IMDb, so
we've got to get rid of
we've got to erase that. So.
I don't know if it's something that hopefully it's not. I mean, it was a great filmmaker, and it was a good experience.
It was,
it was the last piece of acting that we ever did, and there's probably a good reason for that.
There's a very good reason for that.
But Colin has been such a friend and a collaborator to us for many, many years, and one of the people whom we just really trust implicitly. If you're lucky enough to keep on working in films, you do start to realize that there are a few people, very few really, that you just want to keep with you on the journey as you go along, and Colin is really certainly one of those people. He's he's been a guru-like figure to us at different stages.
100%.
He's always, as you will know from having worked with him, such a kind and compassionate person, as well as being brilliantly creative, and has a real sense for people and what they need and the bigger picture around a project, not just I think people think that a script editor or a story editor is there to look at the words on the page, and Colin is always great at relating it all to the much bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve as people, what means something to you, and how that relates to what's going on the page. And he's always been a very it's always a good feeling. You feel secure whenever Colin is around and with you on a project.
Yeah, I mean, as Lisa said, he's definitely one of our most trusted collaborators, and somebody that we trust completely. Yeah. Hi.
He's a wonderfully big.
Hi.
There's two of us, so I know that caused a bit of confusion earlier in the week. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yes, just back to Colin quickly, and then
The Pauls. Yes, I was texting both Pauls about each other.
Yeah.
Whole confusion.
Yeah.
That's all right.
There's
We can see you here,
too
so
many
it makes it easier.
Yeah.
Too many Pauls, but Colin's a wonderful, big, empathetic sponge. We love him. But moving on to the main attraction.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think once you've listened to Colin, actually, you've probably heard everything that you need to hear about making films. You've got it all. It's quite difficult to follow that.
Okay, so I suppose we might start kind of from the beginning. I mean, I know there's different roads that kind of brought you to where you are in terms of filmmaking, both of you. I might kind of just ask how that kind of journey started for you individually and then collectively.
Sure. Well, I'll go first, shall I? I was working, having done some work with Colin in script editing and things like that, and I was living in London, and I'd just done a master's in screenwriting, and after I finished that, I was just trying to get the first pieces of writing out there into the world. I didn't envisage directing at all at that point. It was screenwriting that I was interested in. And it was just sort of trying at that entry level to try and get work produced through things like the BBC Writers' Room, all those kind of entry level places, and realizing quite quickly that it's so difficult to get your work out there if you don't have anything that you have produced yourself. And so for that reason, like a lot of people do, I thought it seemed like a good idea to make some short films. And so I'd written a couple of scripts, and that's when Glenn and I really got together and decided to work on this together, because Glenn's background, which I'll tell you about.
Yeah, well, I think as Colin had touched on earlier, I started as a graphic designer. In fact, I think one of the first times I met Colin in the old Northern Ireland Film and Television Commission, as it was then. Colin did a short film scheme called Six Pack. Yeah, which was 6 short films, and I was brought in to design posters for each of those films. That was the first time I met him. So I designed posters for Brian Kirk's first short film, I think, and Enda Hughes, and all these different local filmmakers. I did their posters for their films, and had no intentions of being a filmmaker at all. I mean, I was firmly ensconced in the world of graphic design, and but then as the years went on, I did a lot of music stuff. I worked a lot with David Holmes, and I did a lot of David's covers, and through that I got offered his pop promos, his videos.
Congratulations, he just got nominated for an Emmy this week.
He did indeed, and I think well deserved. I think the music for Killing Eve is really awesome. I think it's like amazing piece of work, so it's well deserved. But yeah, so David and myself worked together on those, and actually Lisa worked in projects. The three of us actually worked on projects together long before either Lisa and I were filmmakers. Lisa would write things that would sleeve notes for David's records, and I did the covers, and then it sort of flipped around where we started shooting film, and David would do score for us. So yes, he's another one of our long-term collaborators that we've had a great journey with over the years, and continue to do so. But it got to the point where there were scripts. There were a couple of scripts. Glenn had the knowledge of sort of working on the floor, making shooting stuff, and knew a couple of DPs and all that sort of stuff. So we just pulled our resources and our knowledge and went into making a couple of shorts together. And the first was just one that we cobbled together from just for nothing really, with some actors, and it was it was a really good experience, and through it we met the editor that we've continued to work with as well, Nick Emerson, and then we met another and I think it was just a process of discovering through that, and then
I suppose primarily through the 18th electricity plan, which was our next short, which was a much, you know, that on that we had a proper crew. There were 50 people involved. You know, it was a lot more like the kind of filmmaking experience that, you know, this, like a proper filmmaking experience in a sense. And I think it was just a surprise to find, I'm just going to speak for myself here, you can say your piece, but
well, you do tend
that I just, you know, having thought that what I really wanted to be doing was to be sitting just, you know, writing and, you know, doing that kind of much more solitary work, that I really enjoyed being in this big kind of team of collaborative people and shaping how that would go, and just the energy and the excitement of that, of the day-to-day business of making a film. You know, it was just so enjoyable and exciting to put it all together that way. So that's where it began. And
yeah, I think that's true. I think probably both of us, you know, as a graphic designer, I always worked on my own. I was self-employed. I was so it was kind of a, you know, the clients would come in and I would go and visit clients and stuff, but it was still quite a solitary existence. You know, there wasn't much collaboration really. And I guess when Lisa was writing, it was a similar sort of thing. So I think that was the thing. I mean, I think we love that. We still continue to love that. That's one of the best things about being a filmmaker, is that you get to make films with people that you hope are your friends, become your friends, and you know, you meet wonderful people along the way, creative, interesting people, and that's a really amazing part of the whole journey. And that's the thing I think that really sucked us in. And also, you know, just I remember the very first day on our, not on our kind of, we did a very, very low budget short, as Lisa was saying, which was one actor, one location, very contained. But the bigger 18th electricity plan short that we did, I remember getting to the end of that first day where we shot the end of the film at that point. And I remember really welling up and being really overwhelmed with emotion. And it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks, and it came from nowhere, and I didn't know what the hell it was. And I kind of, after that, I sort of knew there was something about that was really compelling and addictive. And it's good. I hope I never lose that feeling. It still pops up from time to time.
So you're reminded occasionally why you still do it?
Oh, no. I'm always stoked on a daily basis. I know why I'm doing it, but I'm just saying, well, I wouldn't like to think I was bursting into tears every day and every minute. But it's nice to be overwhelmed sometimes. But the collaborative nature of the tribe aspect. Yeah, totally. I think that's incredibly powerful, and I love that. I really love that about it all.
There's those moments, I guess, with filmmaking where things just gel, and I guess that's it. That's what you're always looking for. Yes,
and it's those kind of miraculous moments, because they are kind of miraculous. It's miraculous that you're standing there in the first place. You know, that you've managed to get finance, you've managed to jump through all those hurdles that I heard you talking to Colin about, persuading producers, financiers, everybody of a vision, and getting cast and getting their dates to align with your financiers, you know, and on and on and on. So it's a minor miracle that anything happens, and then, you know, to actually shoot something that works in that moment is even more spectacular. It's
The elusive jump from shorts to features is something, you know, that is incredibly difficult. And maybe looking back, do you see how, like, where other filmmakers maybe go wrong, or like, I guess patience is a big part of it as well. Even going from your first to your second, it can be how, like, you know, how much is patience involved?
Well, yes. I mean, I think you have to be stupidly optimistic in a way and always believe it's just about to happen. I mean, that's really what worked for us, and you can spend a lot of years waiting for that. We were the first feature that we made. We were very fortunate, really, to be offered that one, and it happened quite soon after we had made the 18th electricity plan, and it did quite well in some festivals. And then we worked with the guys at Green Park Pictures to, you know, they offered us the opportunity to work on a script by Dara Carville, and You know, it is. We loved it. You know, it's a great kind of. It's a story called a film called Cherry Bomb, and it's you know, it's the story of a teenage sort of love triangle that goes south in lots of ways.
I think a lot of people will remember it. I loved it at the time. It's great.
Oh, thank you. It's a very exuberant kind of film,
Yeah.
and we really enjoyed making it. And I think, you know, we found a lot to love in it. It was a coming of age story as well in many ways, and I think there is a lot of luck involved. I mean, I'm sure you've read Sidney Lumet's book where he talks about, you know, the reason you got to have a really personal reason to make every film that you choose, because you spend so long with it. You know, it has to be something from the heart. And he says, but when it's the first feature you get offered, you just do it because it's an opportunity, you know. And fortunately for us with this, it was much more than that, and we really did find things to love in it. But I just think that recognizes what an unlikely chance it is for people, and one shouldn't take it personally or feel that one is doing anything wrong if it doesn't arise. You know, there are so many brilliant filmmakers and shorts filmmakers around nowadays, and people who are working so dynamically toward that goal, that and persistence is the only thing that you really need. You know, there are probably a lot of people with talent, but to just stick at it through all the times that you feel it's not really working. And I mean, there is a bit of dumb optimism about that. I remember when we were making, we went into making Good Vibrations. I mean, we had a lot of setbacks with that one, but I remember there being about a year or two when we kept thinking, we're definitely going to be shooting this in 3 months. And so we kind of kept on organizing our lives around this idea that we were definitely going to be shooting it in 3 months. And I mean, your life can slide by you very quickly, but you know, had we not kind of spent that time hanging on, had we given up at any one of those moments when, you know, there was one point, you know, just a few months before we did shoot it, that everyone was saying, right, well, you know, it was great, but we're just going to have to do it in a different way. We're going to have to just get some friends and shoot it on the weekends, because, you know, we're never going to get the finance together for proper shoot. So
I mean, to sort of put that into context, we had been probably at this point working on the film for about 5 years. We've been developing it for about 5 years. So
now, obviously, it wasn't the only thing that we had been doing, but we certainly realized after that you have to have a lot of irons in the fire and things ready to go, because things can just slide away. So, and I think that's even the case with, even if whatever you've done before that has gone well, because there are so many, and you know, we're living in these COVID times, there's so many other factors that can come into it, that can get in the way.
Even at that point, was Good Vibrations part of a slate of ideas or projects or scripts that you were working on, or was it like, we're all in for this and it needs to happen?
I mean, there were other projects, although, you know, looking back on it, I don't think those projects were pushed to a level that were anywhere near being ready to be made. I think the thing about Good Vibes was it was teetering on the brink for about 3 years. I mean, we literally thought we were making it every 3 months for about 3 years. You know, we would have all the finance, and then something crazy would happen, that we would lose a massive big chunk of it. You know, one of the crazy things, it was the UK Film Council. The Tories got in and then disbanded it overnight, and yeah, and that we lost a big chunk of our finance. The person that we were dealing with, of course, then left. You know, it's just all this stuff.
And we'd already shot a pilot for it. They'd asked us to shoot a pilot for it, which we had done. It was a great thing to do, but you know, it seemed like a big enterprise when we'd already made a feature. But we did that, and then after all of that, it seemed like.
But I mean, that was just one example. But that just, things like that just kept happening. It kept sort of building up, and we would get it to the point where, okay, we're going 3 months, and then it collapsed, and it collapsed again, and then another major, you know, and we would get another chunk of cash in, and that would, okay, that's the final piece, and then it would fall apart. And I remember.
So ultimately, it benefited the project. Though you can see it. Like, obviously, I've seen the film when it came out, and I rewatched it over the last couple of days, and I was like, it's like, you know, I think it's really well made. Like, really well made. I mean, technically as well as narratively as well, which is very rare with respect to a lot of Irish films. You know,
Thank you.
That's very
I think
kind.
it's constructed incredibly well. Was like, and it's also quite rare that there's cross-border participation and a lot of cross-casting as well on a project, which is really interesting, which you don't see as much as you'd like,
Exactly. Yeah. No. And
that's, in fact, we have been, as far as that's concerned, even in Cherry Bomb, we had collaboration from the Irish Film Board and finance from them. So we did a lot of our posts down south as well at Screen Scene, and so we've had a good relationship with both bodies, from both them and Northern Ireland Screen.
And we shot Dundalk as well, and for Good Vibes.
So we've worked with them, both all along the way. And I don't know how unusual that is, but it's been really great for us because it does open up that world, and to be able to, I think to be able to, to just sort of to tell a story like Good Vibrations, which was about just that great spirit of music bringing people together, to be able to do something really collaborative, on the island was great. And we had a brilliant time working with the crews. Our crew was mixed with between people from north and south, and the shoot was split quite evenly between them, and it was a great experience, I must say.
And a big
like we did have all that time for, I suppose, going into Good, but then you have all this time and development and all that sort of stuff, and then of course sod's law is it all happens really quickly. Then somebody goes, okay, right, well, there is money, but you have to do it now in the next 3 months. Do you know what I mean? Which is exactly sort of the way it happened, and it was like, all right, shit, let's go.
It's now or never.
No, totally. So everybody just, like, after all the various trials and tribulations, it's like, right, just whatever it takes, we're just doing it right now.
But that really suited the atmosphere of the piece as well. It was a very, that was really what it was about. And you always want to just infuse your piece with the tone that you want. And there was a certain kind of chaos and exuberance in that we wanted to harness in the story. I mean, like Cherry Bomb. Cherry Bomb was this teen movie which was really about, and we were so lucky to work on that with this fantastic young cast, who came over, and Rupert Grint, Robbie Sheehan, and Kimberly Nixon, who came over and spent this, we had this incredible time making that film. It was like I don't know, it was just a very joyous experience, and we had so many crazy nights out, and and
Jimmy Nesbitt was in the mix as well.
Yeah.
So there was a couple of crazy nights out.
And, he likes the pint, doesn't he?
We had it was such
Jimmy
a good
was
time.
great.
And I think some of that flavor seeped into it, and of course it was our first movie, so there was just this sense of there's a real thrill about it. And Good Vibrations as well had this sort of slightly anarchic feel of people. We had Terry Hooley, who the story is about. He was very much involved with it. Some of the punks who were around at that time were very much part of making the film as well. They helped train our bands to use our instruments in kind of punk style of the period punk style, so that they weren't playing them like kind of modern indie bands. So there was a whole world around that film that also became part of what.
Well, I think that's
the spirit of the film.
I think that's that's what we try to do when we make films, is kind of widen the family and bring in as many people as we can, and especially, say for example, Good Vibrations, you just did not want to make that film with all those people who lived through that stuff feeling like they were on the outside. There probably are films that you could do that with, but not Good Vibrations. Good Vibrations, you had to bring them in and make them part of it. And I think being able to kind of use them as, wardrobe advisors, we had a brilliant, but like they supplied some of the clothes, so some of the clothes that people were wearing were actually authentic from the era. And, as Lisa was saying, Brian from Rudy came in and taught the guys how to play their instruments, and basically coordinated rehearsals with the bands. It was that sort of widening the family, that sort of collective spirit. I think if you can kind of harness that, I think that stuff that happens off screen sort of ends up being on the screen, if that makes any sense.
It sounds like you weren't allowed to not be authentic.
Yeah, no,
That's it, and it was a choice. You know, we could have decided to you know, it's difficult when you're, you know, when you're looking at stories that are about real things that have happened to people, especially within living memory, and especially when it's a period of history that's so sensitive and subject to so many interpretations, and one that you really have to respect because of what it meant and did in people's lives. So I think it came from that place of just really wanting to respect the history, because of course we both grew up in Northern Ireland, but not at that time, and so we didn't live through it with them, but we wanted to feel like we gave, you know, and I think that was part of the craft of it, was to just really hone a point of view that wasn't about taking a side in the story of the Troubles, but finding a very specific point of view outside of it, a sort of another voice in that, in the narration of that big story. So and it felt, yes, the way to ground it, the way to have that respect in that kind of storytelling was to, you know, really go to the source and talk to the people who were there and try to do something that reflected. You can't tell everybody's story, and it wasn't about that, but it was just about getting something of the texture of that time that felt like it would mean something to the people who had been involved. That's what we used to try and be as authentic as possible, and they were so helpful and so generous to us. And we you know, if we didn't get to know them then, we've met quite a few people at different screenings and things.
You must be incredibly proud of it, because it was so well received, you know.
Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, it's kind of odd because it was on the BBC. Just they repeated it during lockdown, not that long ago, and I haven't seen it in years. I mean, it's like we did obviously when it was out, go to lots of the screenings and premieres and stuff, but you know, it's not something I'd looked at. But it was on TV, so I turned it on for a bit, and yeah, I mean, I you know, I was proud of it, and it felt okay. I wasn't hiding behind the sofa. I mean, I kind of, you know, one of the great things about a story like that was that you're just able to throw the kitchen sink at it, like in kind of, it's, as Lisa touched on earlier, you know, it's just harnessing that chaos. And I can remember, you know, even in the edit, even getting to that point and thinking, well, you know, maybe we need something more here. And it was just like, okay, well, what will that be? And then just, you know, using archive, using graphics, using stills, you know, through whatever we had at it to tell the story or to enhance the story. And, you know, the way we always looked on it anyway was that it was kind of like a punk zine, you know, it was that kind of, it was cut and paste. So, you know, if you need something, you just cut that out, stick that in there. That's fine. Put it in rough. It doesn't matter as long as it's kind of telling the story. And I guess that kind of exuberance.
That's it. But it is also absolutely about it coming down to one very clear idea, and that idea of what it is and what it's going to be like has to absolutely resonate through every aspect of the storytelling. So that, I mean, it's tone, and that was what there was such a specific tone to that piece. There was that kind of dark humor that we kind of recognized from where we grew up, and that was very much part of our earliest discussions with, I mean, Cherry Bomb was something that we were invited on to do, but Good Vibrations was something that we developed really from the ground up with the brilliant writers, Colin and Glenn Patterson, with whom we're still working on other projects. And you know, from the time the story was a paragraph long, we were talking about the tone of it and where that balance of darkness and comedy would stand, and how that thread would work through everything. And that really became so important, because of understanding that really well was a great way to make choices about what kind of story we were working, or what kind of stylistic choices we would make. And also it's just about boiling it down to that one word, you know, one idea that, you know, that idea of a punk fanzine is absolutely rooted in the spirit of the story we were trying to tell, which was about music, you know, this defiance. You know, it's about Terry Hooley, but it's really a story about the the power of music and youth to, you know, defy the toughest of times. And that idea of a punk fanzine was an absolute, you know, was a manifestation of that idea. And once you know that, and once you know your style, if you say, right, it's going to be like a punk fanzine, that comes from somewhere quite deep in terms of our understanding of the themes. But it makes clear decisions for you stylistically. It makes you open to making those kinds of choices in the edit and saying, yes, it's fine for us to put the rules of this project include being able to, you know, use archive, or being able to, you know, put some kind of cut up graphic work in it. You know, it's going to work because we absolutely understand what the rules of the piece are and what it means at heart.
I think the other thing, I suppose, Lisa's talking about tone. I suppose maybe one of the things at the time, I can't really think, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but certainly the Troubles, things that have been made about the Troubles tended to be incredibly dark for very good reason. They tended to be about soldiers, about prisoners, about family. You know, it was the very dark side of it, and I understand those stories have to be made, should be made, and have been made brilliantly, and should continue to be made. But I suppose one of the stumbling blocks that we had, actually, I think, in the initial days of trying to get it financed, was that people just really hadn't thought about that there could be a film like Good Vibrations that had humour that would be set in Belfast at that time. And I think some of the people that we talked to, some of the financiers, kind of tried to push it into a darker direction. They
like subvert the narrative into a kind of, in a way, you weren't
the
comfortable.
kids, you know, they wanted the kids to be the punks to be more impacted by the Troubles. Like, one of the punks is shot, or, you know, there's, you know, and we honestly, we had that. I mean, in actual fact, we lost a major financier based on that note, and they came back and said they'd been developing it with us for about a year and a half, and everything had been going well. It went to the wider team just to go to production financing. And the next thing, we got a whole set of notes that were really, they essentially just wanted us to turn it into kind of like, you know, Bloody Sunday, or, yeah, you know, something like a darker piece about the Troubles.
I think it absolutely works for the, you know, for all the, you know, issues of integrity to the narrative. You know, yes, it's, you know, the elephant in the room is there, but it's not as prominent as you're expecting it to be. I think is what works really well in terms of the film. I think it's not, with respect, like you said, it's been done incredibly well dozens of times and will continue to be. But it was just refreshing to just see a great story, you know, lovely people that happened at that time.
Yes, because in a way, you know, that was there were tough times for everybody here. But when you grew up through that, you know, you still had friends, you still went out, you still listened to music, you still were a teenager. You know, there were all those things that were still going on, and you know, and punching through all of that.
I think just, you know, in terms of the kind of choices, technical or creative choices we made, we made it quite clear choice for ourselves to say that this was the background. And then this was the foreground. This was the backdrop of the story, and this was the foreground of the story. So the story happened here, and you couldn't tell it without the backdrop. But the muscle of the story was happening in what was going on in the foreground.
I think. Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
I think also there was something that actually between Glenn, Colin, Lisa, and myself that kind of, I think we also were aware that there was something maybe slightly subversive in telling it, because, you know, the Troubles are in it, and there are moments of darkness about the Troubles, and we sort of thought coming at it from a different angle, you know, kind of that stuff sort of sliding in a lighter story, I guess, was kind of slightly subversive too. You know, it had a slightly double-edged sword in there, which was appealing to us. So we thought it was kind of an interesting way to deliver some of those.
Yeah, and it works really well. Bravo. We might.
Do people still come up to you and tell their Terry Hooley stories?
Yes.
Yeah.
New one.
Yes, it mostly involves meeting Terry in a bar somewhere and then not going home for 2 days or something.
But we did a lot of traveling with Terry with the film, and he continues to do a lot of festivals and different events talking about it.
The film seemed to give him kind of a bit of a new lease, or definitely brought him to a new audience.
Yeah, and I think
that was one of the things that we hoped would happen, because we felt that people should really understand the incredibly positive effect that he had on people's lives. I mean, there are some of the kids that we talk about in the story and people that we've met who said, you know, that we're quite clear about the fact that he saved them. He saved their lives from the paths that they could have ended up going down. And, you know, he really meant a lot to people and was, you know, a hugely important figure at that time. So one of the things that we were hoping for would be that more people would understand that.
We might move on to your project and ask. I know this is quite personal to you as a family, I guess. The inception of that. You might tell us a little bit, kind of, how it came about and why it was it a project that wouldn't leave you alone?
Yes, I think, well, as you might, I don't know if people know, but the script of our film Ordinary Love was written by Owen McCafferty, who's a really wonderful playwright from Northern Ireland, and I'm sure many people will be familiar with his work. And the script of Ordinary Love was based on the journey that Owen and his wife Peggy went through when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it's fictionalized in many ways, but you know, a lot of the events, that it's a story that takes place over the course of a year, about two characters, Tom and Joan, played by Liam Neeson and Leslie Manville. And it begins when Joan is, you know, finds a lump in her breast and is quickly diagnosed with breast cancer. So a very sensitive sort of story, particularly as, you know, the people who, the writer of it had gone through it so recently, a few years ago, but, you know, recently with his own wife. And so again, there was a lot of reason to just, there was a lot of material, there were huge areas that one had to really treat with a lot of respect when making the story. And I think, you know, there are, as we discovered when we were talking to people about this story in the early days, it's a story that everyone has gone through to a degree. And if, you know, if you have, you know, if you haven't been diagnosed with a disease like that, you know someone in your family, you know a friend. We all understand that journey. You know, we're all looking at questions of, you know, loss, of losing people. Those are big themes that are alive in everybody's lives as they go about their everyday business of, you know, going to the supermarket, just, you know, the day-to-day, having a cup of tea, all the day-to-day things of life. So it just felt really, there was just something about the characters and how they, and I think about just that concentration in the script on the day-to-day stuff of life, that texture, a little bit like Good Vibrations. Anyway, it's a very different kind of film, but the things that people are doing as they are dealing with this stuff that's going on in the background, you know, there's still that urge to live and connect and laugh and enjoy things with people, and just that beautiful interaction between two people. And I think that was also the thing, that after Good Vibrations, it was lovely to focus on something that was a really intimate, almost two-hander, spending all this time with two characters and really getting inside their relationship. But I think what really spoke to us about it was that it was a love story, and a really unusual kind of love story about people in middle age. You know, we don't often see those love stories. It wasn't the beginning of their romance. It wasn't the end of it. It's about what happens right kind of in the depths of this really long-term relationship that people have. And that felt like something that we don't see an awful lot of in cinema. And we just wanted to honor the poetry of that kind of everyday moment and relationship.
Yeah, and we loved how stripped back it was, and how precise the writing was. And you know, I mean, it was a gear change definitely from Good Vibrations, but very appealing. You know, like as we said, Good Vibrations was through the kitchen sink at it, and that was, you know, that was wonderful. The energy of that was really wonderful. But equally, this was really great just to be so intimate and so pared back, and it was about removing things and just emphasizing the important aspects of the story.
And I think it was a script that gave us a lot of space as well. We always look, if we're developing something, and we like Good Vibrations, we developed this through our own production company with David Holmes. And, you know, Owen's writing is a very pared back, that's his style. And as storytellers in a visual medium, we really enjoy work that gives us space to fight for our own voice in it. You know, it doesn't, that there was definitely space for us to find the poetry in the story and to find the visual poetry and use all those elements of cinematic language to find ways to explore these characters and their very specific world. So that was also, I think, very exciting to us.
Was there a conscious decision, not to say that you didn't have, you know, kind of names or that the notion of a bigger draw in terms of box office and getting bums on seats, but was that a conscious element, or was it very much a case of trying to get the best people for the part and a mindfulness of other, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it always starts with best people for the part, for sure. I mean, but you know, the reality of it as well is that it's going to be easier to make a film, you know, if there is somebody who is going to get bums in the seats or is going to sell to an international audience and stuff like that. Okay. You know, so I mean, in this particular instance, we've definitely felt it was the best people for the role. There was no notion of it being anything other than that. I mean, we had how Liam came to the project was that we had been working on another project with Liam on and off for a couple of years, and it wasn't a project that we were producing or had developed. It was another producer had brought us in as directors, and for one reason or another, that project has yet to be made. But we got to meet Liam a couple of times, so he was in our minds. You know, we kind of felt that we knew him a little bit as Liam, you know, as opposed to his screen persona. And when we read this, I mean,
I think we just felt that, just from having talked to him, that there were parts of the character that he would really relate to and that he would enjoy, the kind of themes and characters that he talked about wanting to play felt like they were here on, you know, one of them was here on the page, and we could just hear his voice in the rhythms of the character of Tom. So it was quite an easy, it was an easy decision to send it to him first.
We actually sent him the first draft of the script, which is, I think, pretty rare. I mean, we were sort of confident enough that the first draft would be enough for him to connect with, and in actual fact, that there wasn't, you know, it stayed fairly true to that first draft, didn't it? I mean,
there was work afterwards, but I think you could definitely see the spirit of the piece there for sure.
But yeah, Liam connected with it immediately, which was.
And then, you know, of course, Leslie is just this glorious actress. I mean, honestly,
and what a time together as well, you know.
Oh yeah.
And she's extraordinary. You know, they share something. You know, I think you obviously we weren't going to be auditioning actors like that, so you just want to have a sense that they're going to be two people who are going to work together well, or that they have the same sort of vibe, the same sort of atmosphere as actors. And you know, with both Liam and Leslie, you know, everything they do, you just believe it. You know, there's this naturalism that they both can tap into effortlessly. They both seem, you know, there's an intelligence and a wit and a sense of humor that you can glean from their performances, and a low key sense, you know, and so it proved, you know, when we finally met them and, you know, got their timetables to align and got together in a room with them, you know, they just got on very well as people as well. And they both, all those characteristics that we had felt from, you know, from just seeing them work, you know, that all proved to be true when we ended up working together on set. You know, it was they're both very down to earth people. There were no egos. You know, there was a lot of, even though the subject matter was, you know, it was tough in many ways. There were a lot of tough scenes to do, particularly for Leslie. There was always a real lightness and good humor, you know, with those actors on set, and it really infused the whole world of the shoot. And they just felt like people, you know, instantly it felt like they'd known each other for a long time, and they'd never met actually before that.
Wow.
But they made good friends very quickly.
I was going to ask
because,
about
I mean,
that.
it was, yeah, they had to create this, not only their own characters, but, you know, this the entity of this 30-year marriage, you know, without much rehearsal time. It's pretty amazing that they did it so beautifully.
Absolutely. I think it's all, like, in terms of the subtext, I don't want to give too much away because obviously a lot of people, I would imagine. Also the idea of their marriage being haunted by something in the background. You're not entirely sure what that is really well done. And it's not, you know, it rings incredibly true. And also, as you know, as someone who's personally who's experienced somebody going through that a number of times, I think her performance in particular, and obviously through the writing as well, has the nail was really hit on the head. In terms of the experience and how it affects other people as well. And it was quite, for me anyway, it was quite emotional watching it because I've never really seen it dealt with in that way. I thought it really worked incredibly well. And without giving away the ending.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things also that we connected with the writing and that we felt that we had to all kind of hold our nerve with on this one was not to turn it into melodrama or not to sensationalize or sentimentalize the whole thing. And I think maybe that type of a drama, you can veer into that quite quickly. And so we all went into that with our eyes open, and I hope that we didn't do that, because I think that maybe I think by pulling back and stuff like that, actually we sort of felt that it gave it more power. Because I think when you're poking an audience and saying, right, this is what you're supposed to be feeling here, this is, you know, I think an audience feels that and kind of can pull away from that a little bit or feel like you're being manipulated. But if I suppose it's slightly more naked, for want of a better term, and I think that was certainly what we set out to do.
How much of that came in the edit? Colin kind of mentioned it, how you have to rewrite a film almost in the edit. What were the big challenges for the edit?
Well, I think I would say probably the biggest challenge is, and we knew it was going to be the case. You know, it's a story that is built on the minutiae of life. It's 100,000 tiny moments that go to build up a bigger story and a bigger world, and hopefully that means something. And that's what we really wanted to do, was to focus on just the poetry of those everyday moments. And what you have then is also the need to propel an audience through a story, to keep them sort of wanting to kind of watch the next scene, the next chapter, and to create that sense of propulsion, so that the film, it doesn't feel like it's just sitting still. And when you don't have big events or plot points to deal with, you know, that having those things can make it much easier to create that momentum to the end of the film, to keep people really engaged right until that last moment. And so I think that was probably, you know, working with Nick, our great editor, Nick Emerson, and us, I think that those were the conversations. There'll be a lot of other challenges, I'm sure you remember, but that's the one for me that a lot of things came down to, was to honor that poetry of the everyday and those moments, but also create a satisfying emotional journey for an audience, so that somehow in the arrangement of everything and the pacing and the timing and all of the other cinematic elements, that you do the work of making those small moments accrue to something that feels like something bigger in terms of meaning or truth.
Something we always, in the edit, we always talk about, I mean, we talked about in Good Vibrations as well, and it's sort of, I think it maybe has a bit of it, certainly. It's the musicality of the edit. So it's almost like, you know, like scoring music. There's rises and falls and shifts in pace, and that I think is hugely important, and that is something you it certainly, you know, it starts in the writing, but then you really can take it to a completely other level in the cut. And I think if you get those rhythms working right, that can drive the story on, and that thing that Lisa was talking about, that can propel the whole thing. And you know, I mean, actually, that's, you know, that's the kind of the visual musicality, or the musicality even of the storytelling. But then, of course, there is David's actual music that comes into it, and certainly within Ordinary Love, that was again about pulling things back and keeping it very spare and not over egging the emotion. And you know, right from the early days, we all talked before we even shot. We were talking about how you know, we were all agreed, you know, David, Lisa, myself, that it wasn't about kind of the thumb and the scales type score, you know, and
nuances. You can see all the nuances. It really works really well. A lovely marriage between the performances and the score and direction. It just works really well. We might kind of just step away from that for a moment, just to kind of talk about some, in terms of your ethos and the way you work for filmmakers that are tuning in. And we asked this of people who come onto the podcast, but I think it's important to kind of show people, regardless of their level of experience, kind of how that people of all levels deal with rejection and the ups and downs that everybody else does. So from your own perspective, how do you deal with kind of rejection or no's, soft no's, hard no's, whatever no's you're dealing with?
yeah,
You certainly get as many of them at every stage as you always did. I think over time you learn to take them less personally. That might be the case, I think. And I think over time, I think you realize that you can't, I mean, it is, there are a lot of ups and downs. There are a lot of times that you think that things are, and I think you just have to be prepared for that if you're going to work in it. I don't think there's a point that you get to where it's all this plateau and everything just works out and you know, you're in clover from then on. I just don't think that happens to people. Maybe it does. I don't know. Not us yet. Anyway. But
we've made it. Who are all those fuckers down there?
Yeah.
exactly.
But no, and things will go wrong, and different things will go wrong, and things that you absolutely never expected to go wrong will go wrong. You know, you think you've prepared for everything, and actually you were looking over here and focusing on all of this, and then, oh, you know,
That's totally the
some
case.
other thing has just completely derailed everything, and it's exhausting, actually. I mean, and I think that's, you just have to be prepared that that's the case and not take it personally. Over time, I think we've probably, I mean, you still do a bit take it personally. Things are going to hurt sometimes, and you know, you just deal with that whatever way. I tend to go and kind of just hide in my cave for a day or two, and Glenn likes to kind of rail at the world for a bit.
Yeah, drink whiskey and smash bottles against one.
But I do think over time you start to realize that is just the tenor of the world, and it's really got nothing to do with you. And a lot of it, you might feel like you could have done things differently, but nobody can get everything right. You know, you work hard. You've got to give yourself a break when, you know, there are a lot of things that are beyond your control, and things will go wrong for reasons that are beyond your control. And if you can try to just not invest everything in one project or one outcome,
yeah, I think
that's helpful. I think
that is helpful. I mean, we did invest. We did have other projects around Good Vibrations, but we invested a lot on it. And I mean, that was probably the most painful of everything. I mean, they're all, I mean, like, after Good Vibes, we had several other projects which crashed and burned completely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And you know, Ordinary Love actually happened really unbelievably quickly. You know, that was like boom, like all of a sudden, you know, first draft, Liam signs up to it, then everything moves really quickly.
But there were at least 2 films that we were sure that we were going to be shooting before that.
Totally, and that have gone forever, really. So, and you know, and we put in years. I mean, I actually feel like we made those films. I mean, in my head, I still, honestly, because you know, they're about certain subject matter, which I think I see a photograph comes up, and I go, oh yeah, and like I feel like connected, like it's almost like a family member.
You do so much in-depth thinking about stuff.
Yeah, it's
and then it's gone, and you know, you haven't really even got paid for it.
No.
But that's kind of what
yeah,
happens.
as directors, you know,
I might jump in just there quickly. Somebody asked a question, actually, one of the viewers, which is relatable to what you just said. I hope you don't mind me asking this. Typical Irish people being very modest. Once you're in those 3 years of development or whatever you're working on, how do you support yourselves? Are you paid for development or doing other jobs to make ends meet?
The truth is, it's tiny. It's bits of money from all sorts of places.
Yeah.
So it's you know, you have a few projects on the go, so you're getting a little bit of development money here and there from each of those. Recently, Lisa's been doing more writing, so that also pays a little bit. Yeah, if you're writing scripts and doing that, you're getting paid. I do commercials from time to time. It's not my full-time thing, but I do enjoy it because I like to go out with a crew. I like to film. You know, I like to
try out ideas and stuff. And
a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. You know, it's good not to have 5 years between when you set foot in set, which is not exactly ideal. So that kind of keeps the wheels turning a little bit. But yeah, I think over the years we learned that it's lots of little bits that join up, and you have to just keep a lot of plates spinning in that period.
When a new film comes out, is there probably like a flurry of offers or interest? Like I imagine around Good Vibes there was loads of music films or charity, right? And actually I feel the loss of it because I remember you telling me when I was interviewing of the film that you were working on. I was like so excited to see that. So I feel
that was a music film too, right?
Yeah.
And
like, is that the same now? Do you get a bit better at spotting which ones are actually viable as you go along?
Yeah, I think that's really true. You do get, we were talking about this the other day, that things that you could just get mired for years in developing, and things that, you know, whether it's, you know, that we ourselves have brought to, have developed through our company and with writers that we know, or things that we are offered, it does become a bit clearer. I think you just get a sense maybe for what was more likely to
get made. Yeah, there is a bit of that.
But there's a lot of luck as well, and we've had some beautiful projects with people that we really have loved and wanted to work with, and then it just in the puff of smoke.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough. I mean, that thing, you know, just it's so tough. The working on something for that long for very little money, and then it all going away, and it never happens. And I mean, like certainly that whole process during Good Vibes, I mean, I always described it as like crawling across glass or something. You know, it was so painful, and there were so many painful ups and downs to actually get it financed. I mean, once we actually got it financed, I always think by the time we set foot in set, we always have a really good time on set, because you know that's kind of the fun stuff. That's the really.
You're really lucky to be getting to do it. You know, even at the times where you're having angst about one thing or another not working out. You know, the fact is that if you're able to maintain a career in any way, that's a really fortunate thing to be able to do. And you know, it's so you remember that too. But I would say the most practical bit of advice for people who are dealing with no's and setbacks is just to have as many irons in the fire as you possibly can manage. Though not too many, otherwise that's.
And I mean, I'm sure
drop them.
I'm sure it's a bit of a cliche too, but it's just the don't give up. You know, you just have to just keep, you know, get and sort of, you know, I mean, I for one, I mean, I take setbacks. I mean, David's a bit like this as well. Setbacks for me kind of drive me on. I kind of go, right, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong. Yeah. You know, that's kind of, so sometimes it fuels me really to, you know, to kind of come back kind of you know, with more kind of vigor.
Come back stronger. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's the Eric Cantona against Liverpool in '95 or whatever coming back. That kind of thing.
That is an obscure reference.
I love it.
A good reference to Liverpool fans.
I'm a Liverpool fan. So.
I'll give you a better one. It's like Liverpool coming back after 30 years and not winning the league.
Yeah, or like Istanbul. Istanbul maybe.
Thanks so much for everything. This is amazing, and I'm sure people really appreciate it who are watching in. I may just kind of wrap it up now quickly by asking you if you had a little bit of advice for people who were doing interesting things in a shorts capacity, like that young fella down there.
Seen it.
Thanks.
What would you say to people who are kind of making a little bit of headway, and what would you say to either them or yourselves maybe about 10, 15 years ago when you're getting a little bit of attention and you're moving on to the next level?
So is it about finding that first feature?
Just in terms of like advice about how to handle yourself, or what would you do differently, or what would you tell your younger selves?
Okay, I think one of the things that we sort of locked into, I think, but that I think is a really important thing is to make sure that you have. We started off talking about trusted collaborators, and I think that looking back, that's been one of the most important things that we have. There were a few people that we really valued creatively, and that we started working on shorts with and kind of kept going with. And I think without that kind of core team developing, you don't really have the infrastructure that you need to kind of push forward to the next stage, or that's what it felt like for us, and to maintain whatever creative kind of voice you have. I remember being at a talk that Danny Boyle did with Frank Cottrell Boyce, and they said the same thing. They said, don't be trying to work with us. Don't be trying to work with the people who are already established, who are already 10 years down the line from you. The way that you'll make it, the way that you'll take steps through the industry is to develop your own kind of loose gang in a way, because those are the people that you will end up working with, and those are the people who you'll be able to develop projects with, that you can work on each other's stuff with. When you're not getting paid that much, who will go the extra mile, and he will help you develop a kind of creative voice that you can take forward into other projects. So that's one piece of advice, I suppose, that has stood us in good stead, because some of the people that we have continued to work with, it's just really helped having that. And it also helps you psychologically if you have moral support when things are not going particularly well.
Yeah, it's family, you know what I mean? It's we all have each other's back, so we have an infrastructure that you sort of feel that if you have that team behind you, there's nothing you can't achieve, in a way. And in a way, you sort of got to feel that way, because it's all really difficult and challenging and frightening.
Well, you've got to go into a lot of new rooms and be able to sell yourself to people that, in order to get them to work with you. And it's quite nice to have a few people who are already sold on it, before you go in there. And another piece of advice that we were given about directing in the early days was that, all directing is just kind of explaining yourself to people. And if you care about what you're explaining and have a kind of decent way of explaining it, that goes a long way, I think.
Kenneth Branagh, his advice I saw him do I think was one of his acceptance speeches, and he said advice to young directors was eat a banana at 11 o'clock and then a banana at 3 o'clock, which is 4 o'clock. Okay, that's actually suited us. We actually do that a bit, and it actually works quite well.
The Branagh banana.
The Branagh banana, we call it. But in a way, it's kind of pace yourself in your day, because and also I think you've got to pace yourself generally throughout the production. I think that's one of the things that we did. We probably in Cherry Bomb we burnt ourselves out a bit on the production, and then proceeded to burn ourselves out in the edit. Within the first couple of weeks, we were we were doing sort of crazy things like 16-hour days and all that sort of stuff. Just really wanting it to be amazing. and we now know that it's a bit of a marathon, and you've got to kind of really pace yourself, and I think it allows you to sort of consider everything a little bit better, and we do pay attention to that. I think the other thing is, I think it's just about telling the stories that connect with you, that you feel something personal. So there's a personal reason why you want to tell a story, and maybe not looking at being the next whatever is the current flavor of the month.
Yeah, be the first, not the next.
Exactly. Have a voice. Do you know, if there's something that you know about or feel inside that you could bring a unique spin to, I think those are the things that stand out, or those are the things, certainly when we meet young filmmakers and they approach you with something that's, it's.
Yeah, you've got to care about it a lot to make everybody else care.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of other people that you'll have to make care along the way.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome.
We might try and grab you down the line for a bit of a podcast, so we've more of a concrete evidence that we had you. But really appreciate your time, guys. If you're not aware of Glenn and Lisa's work, Good Vibrations is available on YouTube Movies, and Ordinary Love is on iTunes. Please pay for it. That's what people appreciate more, because everybody's struggling to some, or to a larger or lesser degree. So always pay for the work. Thanks so much. If you're please take a moment to support the Children's Ambulance. You can drop them a text. You can make a voluntary donation of €4 by texting Buzz to 50300. Text costs €4, and Bumbulance will receive about $3.60 from each text that's sent in. We really appreciate your time, guys. Continued success. Can't wait to see. I would love to ask you what you're up to next, but we'll have to do that on the podcast some other time.
Okay.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
to see you guys.
Thank you guys.
All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.